I might challenge you or say, are you sure you're not representing something else, maybe, perhaps? I'm Charlie Mitchell. I'm with the city of Dallas. This project, as some of you know, has kind of been a long time coming, so I really appreciate all your efforts. This is the first of up to 5 meetings we'll have this calendar year, so hopefully we'll all get to know each other well. Thanks for your participation.
I'm Chase Ballou. I'm representing the bicycle community.
Are you? Well, okay. Who else are you
I'm representing the City of Dallas Planning Department.
Tom Gilson representing the Freemasons.
Thanks for your
and also the engineering department of Public Works here.
I'm Chase Ballou. I'm representing the bicycle community.
Jim, how are you? Well,
David.
Okay. Who else?
I'm representing the City of Dallas Planning Department.
My background, I was trained as a landscape architect.
Tom Gilson representing the Freemasons.
Thanks for your
and also the engineering department of Public Works here.
I'm Chase Ballou. I'm representing the bicycle community.
Jim, how are you?
Well, David.
Okay. Who else?
I'm representing the City of Dallas Planning.
Thanks for having me here.
I have no idea what hat I'm wearing. Lived in Dallas since '92, love the town. So therefore I also got involved. I'm the vice chair of the Polk County Planning Commission. I'm the president of City Council, and I'm also a developer in town. There. So.
But you didn't say your name, did you?
Oh, I'm Michael Schilling. Everybody can read it, right? Sorry, Jordan.
Yeah, Ben, can we get them on headbands next time?
My name is Trevor Peterson, and I'm representing the Downtown Urban Renewal District Advisory Committee.
I'm John Swanson. I am the president of the City of Dallas Planning Commission. I've been on the Planning Commission for 4 or 5 years now, and I am formerly was a planner on the City of Dallas staff. I've been gone from staff work here for about 8 years, but I'm representing the Planning Commission, and I'm a professional land use planner, 25 years.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex Pascavas. I work for SEDCOR, we're a regional economic development organization. We contract with the City of Dallas, and I also cover Polk County. And so I'm at the MillSite frequently. We're the lead. We usually take the lead for responding to leads from Business Oregon for recruitment. And it's one of few industrial sites left in the valley, so at least in 3 county regions that we cover. So.
Jeff Saunders, the store manager at Cascade Home Center here in Dallas.
My name is Chris French. I'm the service planning manager at Salem Area Mass Transit District. I'm here representing transit, but also pedestrians and bicycle transportation.
My name's Fred Evander. I'm city planner over in Independence, and I'm also a resident in town.
I'm Pete Cairns. I represent the actual mill property. Been involved with the mill now for amazingly about 5 years, trying to keep it in motion, so to speak.
I'm Rita Grady, and I represent Polk Community Development Corporation. We've been working here in the affordable housing industry since 1989. Before that, I was in the Housing Authority. Very involved in housing and development of housing. Also the chair of the Dallas Development. And I have to leave early, I'm sorry. So when that happens and I get up and leave, don't take offense, please.
My name is Benjamin Curry. I support the Planning and Land Use and Economic Development Department. Just happy to sit in. We're going to go ahead and do introductions for the people in our caller queue. I'm just going to call your name one by one if you want to unmute and then give an introduction. Let's go with David.
Hi there, I'm David Berniker. I'm an urban designer with Herbsworks. We're part of the David Emmons consulting team.
Thank you, David. Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Bauer, and I'm representing the Dallas Economic Development Commission, along with Rita and Peter, and I work with Salem Health as the Chief Development Officer.
Michael Duncan.
Hello, everybody. Make sure my camera is working there. Hey, there I am. So I'm Michael Duncan. I work for Oregon Department of Transportation, specifically within the Transportation and Growth Management Program. It's a joint program between Oregon Department of Transportation, ODOT, and DLCD, Department of Land Conservation Development. And we happily and very excitedly funded this project. Love to see where it's going, excited to be at this point in the process. And I guess my role on the project, I sit on the project management team, and I act as the contract administrator for this. So nice to meet y'all.
Natalie.
Hi, I'm Natalie Warner with David Evans and Associates. I'm on the consultant team assisting with public engagement.
Todd.
My name is Todd Boffman. I'm with Dallas School District. One of my roles is Director of Transportation.
And Ryan, did I miss you?
Nope, I'm here. Yep. Hi guys, Ryan Miller. I'm Vice President with Open Road, and actually prior to this, I helped oversee the multifamily affordable housing compliance and development for the state of Oregon. So glad to see everybody.
Thanks all.
All right, great. Thanks for your best. Also, I just wanted to mention that Jeff is also representing the Chamber of Commerce Board too. So, oh, yeah. So, and there are some other members who weren't able to join us today at our first meeting, but this is a great group assembled. So I think at this time, I'll just kind of kick it over to Jim to lead the rest of the meeting.
Thanks, Charlie. Well, we've begun on the 4 main points of today's agenda. We want to just get to know each other, the people involved in this MillSite redevelopment area plan effort, and you'll see a couple more slides about the people and stakeholders. But then we just want to review, kind of orient everyone to the project, since we're right here at the beginning. So we'll talk about the purpose and the objectives of this project. Then we'll transition and have a couple of slides about the place and the study area boundary, just so everybody knows the limits of what we're talking about. And then I saved towards the latter part, the schedule and process about the steps we'll be taking together with you. And because I figure there'll be a lot of questions about that perhaps, and that'll lead us right into the discussion at the end, because we want to, of course, hear from you and see what questions we can answer, and perhaps discuss the objectives a little deeper, make sure we've either covered them, or if we've missed something, we start talking about it right now at the beginning. So with our quick intro here, I think we've covered who from the city and from ODOT, Charlie and his team, and Michael from the state. Jim Henke again, I'm the project manager from the consultant side. And Natalie, who you heard, helping with engagement, is here today. And David from Herbsworks, one of our key partners, is also here, but there's a much larger team. We have a number of transportation folks at David Evans, so that's a big part of what we'll be looking at. And we have environmental specialists who joined us on the site visit. Ethan was with us, and another planner, Gigi, who's a AICP. So there's a larger cast behind the scenes, and some of them may be showing up here at future meetings as topical experts. David with Herbsworks, that firm's led by Marcy McAnally. I've worked with Marcy on a number of projects, and she's really she and David are really urban design and code experts, because one of the outcomes of this is to make some recommendations about how your current code might be amended to reflect what we talk about and the goals of the project. Eco Northwest is not with us tonight. They are a market and real estate economic consultancy, and they'll be helping us think about, what's going on in the marketplace. We want to make sure these ideas are grounded in reality so that when we look at land use and other primarily land use recommendations, they're going to be helping inform that implementation plan and next steps and how funding and things like that could happen. So they're also a team member that I've worked with on a number of other projects. Any questions about kind of the project team? We'll keep going. Speak up if you're inspired, or we can wait till the end and handle questions later. The project advisory committee. We just heard from most of you. I was checking off who's here. I see a few folks couldn't make it tonight. Charlie, was there anyone else you wanted to mention about the advisory committee, or any
No, I don't
comments?
think so. I mean, we put together a pretty broad and deep committee. I don't expect all of them will make every meeting, so it doesn't surprise me that they're not all here tonight. And a number of them did let me know that they weren't able to make it. So I'm again very grateful to those of you who are here tonight.
So I look forward to working together with you as the most direct kind of point of contact and feedback. But there's a broader stakeholder list, and you can see from what's listed on this slide, we're going to be conducting some interviews as part of the process. So beyond this group, there's going to be some additional targeted kind of fact finding that is part of the process. So we don't have names listed here, but these are the list from our engagement plan of who we're considering to reach out to. So the basic purpose of the project is captured by this sentence: provide formal guidance for land use and transportation improvements on and around the 66-acre former mill site. I think that's a pretty good summation of what we're doing, but it's a little more complex than just that. And from our scope of work, there were 5 project objectives that were described in more detail, and they're included in this hard copy package if you would like to read them, but I'll skim through them real fast. Number 1, develop reasonable, implementable, and catalytic land use and transportation strategies, which are responsive and proactive to market forces and redevelopment opportunities. Number 2, identify opportunities and strategies to support the development of commercial land in response to the 2021 Economic Opportunities Analysis. Number 3, identify opportunities and strategies to support the development of medium and high density residential land in response to the 2020 Housing Needs Analysis. Number 4, develop a plan which aligns with the city's strategic plan and identifies a set of improvements and land use which support a new urban renewal district. Number 5, coordinate with the community, property owners, developers, and other stakeholders to ensure widespread support of the project. So we went back to our simple purpose statement and expanded it slightly to include, as I said before, provide formal guidance for local land use and transportation improvements on and around the 66-acre former mill site to support a balanced transportation system for all users and encourage land use that addresses the city's housing and employment needs. Outcomes must enhance community character and natural features and honor the historical context of the mill site. So perhaps that's a more complete description of the purpose. We could pause here and talk about, did we get it right? Is everything captured? Or we could come back and talk more about this. It's up to you.
You got it right.
Peter?
I might add that I feel the mill site and the available commercial industrial lands are critical as additionally critical as tax basis for the city of Dallas, Polk County, and the residents in the community. And we need to take, though, we need to balance those with the other factors that we have.
Okay. So generating taxes is an important outcome.
And being the counselor here, I would echo that.
Okay.
Commercial and industrial lands are the tax base and the revenue for the city itself. And so without more commercial land and preserving our industrial land, those are where we stop having to generate fees on our citizens and we can raise the taxes. So having gone through a fee increase on Monday and having it as well received as it was great. But the promise was to do exactly what we're trying to do and what you talked about just now. And that's create commercial and industrial opportunities that don't exist on a piece of vacant land that is could be an incredible site. And so hopefully through this committee, we get to work through that.
Great.
Can I just ask a question? Like, I see the project objectives. It's talking about medium and high density housing. It's talking about commercial. I'm hearing industrial too. I mean, what is, just at the outset, what is the city what sort of development is the city anticipating there?
Yeah, I think we'll get into that a little deeper later on in the presentation, but you know, the site is currently zoned industrial, so that's the underlying current, land use. I think through this process, we'll explore how can we add to that to address some of our other needs. And so that's where these other land uses kind of come into play, given the topography and the layout and the other adjacent uses around the site. I think we need to look beyond just industrial, and especially beyond just a single site, because the market hasn't proven supportive of that model to this date. So it's our belief that if left alone, it's going to continue to languish. So we need to intervene and create something that's different, that will be more responsive in the market. Does that? But again, I think you'll have some of those questions, answered, Fred, as we kind of move into this. Since I have the microphone, I just wanted to say, Jim, that I appreciate that the last statement in particular. I'm glad that you added that, because as I've gotten more and more familiar with this site, I think it's important not to lose sight of those assets and those characteristics as well. And I think future generations will certainly appreciate that we've paid attention to some of those other things.
I would just say, like, if we're talking more about land use in the future, perhaps we want to revisit the purpose statement, just to make sure that the land use that we want is reflected in the purpose statement.
So a little more on just specifically achieving the kind of land use that this process sort of refines that vision. Okay. Great.
Sure. Question, probably not an answer, because I think that's what we're getting to. It's sort of a chicken and egg question. Is focusing on land use and transportation, that's right there in our purpose statement. Is it the lack of economic development opportunities that have prevented the transportation improvements from occurring, or is it vice versa, that in order to generate economic development, we need to improve the transportation? Because I see two separate but equally important needs that we're addressing here in one big plan. So
that's a great question. I think in my own experience, that's very context sensitive. So dialing it into the city of Dallas, we're still learning, kind of getting up to speed about your specific conditions, about how does the traffic move, where are there issues or not issues, and what is the marketplace currently telling us about demand and where the trends are going.
Right.
So that's exactly what we want to explore as part of this process. And sometimes in, other places, if there's a little bit of a lag in the market interest, sometimes some public investment in transportation improvements can start to unlock land use potential. And then in other places, sometimes that kind of attention to specific sites that are either key opportunities or strategic can kind of create the first catalytic event that ripples out into maybe some subsequent transportation actions.
Right.
So a little hard to say right now.
Well, and that's why I said chicken and egg. It seems to me that we need to be taking a hard look at, when interested developers take a look at a site, what do they want to see when they come and visit it for the first time? They want to be able to drive through it on boulevards that are constructed and are ready for commercial, industrial development, or do they want a blank slate? So it's which comes first here, and which is the priority and which is the secondary benefit, is, I guess, putting it out there for the group to think about.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment. How about we keep rolling? And of course, we can always come back because we have plenty of time at the end for more discussion. This is just a very simple aerial photo exhibit of the study area, and highlighted in red, you can see the boundaries of the mill site, but there is a broader study area extending up Main and Jefferson and a little to the east on, what is that, Monmouth cutoff. So the mill site, although a primary focus of the study, there is other issues outside of the mill site that we want to consider and look at as part of this work. So that's just to get you oriented. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the site. The second exhibit highlights that zoning that Charlie just mentioned. The current site is industrial. We just highlighted it in purple, but it's kind of floating there in that sea of gray industrial zoning. But when you zoom out, you can see the purple outline of the broader study area. It starts to capture some of the other types of land uses, the residential higher density, and coming up towards the central business district. So just something, we're in the kind of fact-finding, information gathering phase of the work. And so just a couple of quick exhibits to show you the study area, just make sure we're on the same page. And if anybody has questions about the specific limits of the work, happy to talk about that. But we'll keep moving. We had a site visit. When was that, Charlie? It was a beautiful sunny day.
December. It was before Christmas.
Yeah. And we got really lucky. We were supposed to have it a month or so before, but guess who got COVID on that day of our originally scheduled site visit? So we delayed it. And I think maybe it was a good thing because the weather was so great in December. And a number of the consultant team and city staff walked around and just, really got a sense of what is there and talked about the range of issues. So I just dropped in, we have many more photos, but these are just a few kind of capturing the extent of what we saw, the exterior spaces, the interior spaces, the view from up on the hill looking down, some of the grade changes, and of course, the creek itself. And we've started to hear a lot from the city, what they've been studying about potentially relocating the creek itself. So any questions about the site, the boundaries, any of these photos or the zoning?
No questions. There's been some discussion about the hillside and what could be developed there? Could you do medium to high density housing? Because it doesn't lend itself to industrial or commercial. And that might be south of the creek potentially. And the movement of the creek would hopefully potentially solve the floodplain issues that may exist on site as well.
Tom, I'm going to put you on the spot here in a moment, so heads up. But for those of you that aren't as familiar with the site as some of us, there's a creek that runs through the site, and for the majority of that distance, it's actually underground. So we see one of the benefits of this overall plan to improve that creek by daylighting the creek and realigning the creek. And we think there's a number of benefits to do that, both from a development perspective as well as from an environmental perspective. Tom, if you wouldn't mind just updating the group real briefly on kind of where we're at with that whole study on the North Fork of Ash Creek and how it relates to this site.
Well, I mean, the study itself has been completed. It was done by Jacobs Engineering. They studied North Fork its entirety, all the reaches through the urban or the UGB, from west to east. There are a couple different solutions that they were looking at for this mill site, and the most desirable one is to realign it. So, I mean, at this point, the study itself has been completed, and we're kind of moving on to the next steps of how do we move forward from there and what can be done. I know that Peter is working with Jacobs on a different opportunity to kind of start the feasibility of that alignment, realignment of the creek itself. But I mean, as of right now, it's just kind of on our horizon, the city's horizon, as a larger, capital improvement project. I guess we'll see where it goes after Jacob's next study with Peter there on they're kind of looking at a little bit more detail of that alignment itself and what it's going to look like on both ends. We'd have 2 new bridges that would need to be constructed, creating a whole new creek channel along that whole reach, connecting it at both ends, permitting involved with all that. I mean, it's a multifaceted project, but we know it's the ideal fix for this property.
So Tom, what this map represents is existing conditions, right? Not a realignment.
That blue line is the realignment.
The blue line is the realignment.
Yeah.
Where does the creek run?
It goes above the.
Okay.
Oh, down some, yeah.
Down. It's lower.
So it goes above the north of the bus yard, then goes under Main Street, right there.
Yep, right through here.
Then drop.
And then it daylights right
Down.
there for about 50 feet,
Yeah.
and then it goes long.
Daylights again, right next to
Cascade.
Well, and there's a existing bridge here and here that both appear to be undersized right now.
Thank you.
And when I talked about community benefits, I talked about, development and I talked about environment, but really the primary driver for the study is flood control, right? Yeah. So that's the other big benefit.
Yeah, because right now with the way that the creek operates is it basically will get out of the channel because there is no channel, and then it just becomes overland flow and it goes wherever it can find a path. So you got it going down roadsides or through neighborhoods where it doesn't need to be going. And the goal is to improve the channel essentially all the way across this area and everything out to the east, down past Godsey Road to have it tie in on the east side east side of town.
And Peter, in certain events right now, it'll just sheet flow across the whole site, right? Isn't that kind of what it does? Oh, yeah.
It runs over the top of Main Street, the bridge at Main Street. We just saw it during this recent event where we had about an inch left before it goes over the top of Main Street, and then it doesn't find its way to the culverts and just
Spreads.
Spreads out.
Yep.
And then eventually it goes away.
Do we consider this to be first level work? Some of the first in work, the realignment?
I mean, it definitely has to, obviously be there before we do full redevelopment of the site, because if we're planning on moving the creek, you can't build south of that until you move it, and then you can't build on top of where it is right now until you move it. So you've got about 50% of that flat, area on the main part of the mill site that'd be hard to develop without it moving.
Doesn't this new realignment actually send it back to more where it originally was?
Maybe.
I mean, you'd probably have to ask your great grandfather that question, but I mean, yeah.
Well, I'm just looking at the topography. It looks like the realignment is the base of the hill is pretty much a little bit out from it. And so that's how the stream would have cut its way through.
I'd say it probably was pretty close to where it's actually buried. They probably just buried the pipes where it is. We are going to be pushing it.
I know they
a
straightened
little
up,
ways,
honestly,
but
because the creek didn't used to flow straight.
The area where the realignment is shown, many parts of that are slightly higher than the main site of the mill. So it's probably not where it was historically located, but from a site development standpoint, it makes for a much more contiguous site to relocate that. Because then you're not chopping it up as much on the part that is flat.
There's a lot of benefits too, also for pushing it against the toe of the slope for, stream shading, all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's the best location across the site.
Plus it takes advantage of the hillside.
Yeah.
Which is
the
developer portion where you're talking about the medium and high density.
Well, it mitigates the need for, bridges or other structures interior to the site for development too. So you're pushing your development more contiguous, and the creek isn't, potentially bisecting development. But in response to, the question about timing, I mean, yes, ideally this probably should be the first thing built, but at least it needs to be delineated so that as we, potentially subdivide the site or build the new roadway, we need to know where that channel is going to go.
Flood control will be a key part of any sort of redevelopment. It's going to be difficult to build something in an area that floods, and so since the purpose of this project is flood control, ultimately.
And that really could attract some federal dollars and some kind of unusual sources for revenue to do the work.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one of the things, we've discussed with Peter and the state is at the appropriate time. We don't know exactly when that appropriate time is yet, but we need to call together what's called a one-stop meeting with all the potential state and federal funders, because you're right. There's a multitude of different agencies that could potentially play into, the realignment of a waterway for future development. So there's lots of players and potentially lots of pots of money potentially available for this project. I use that word potential a lot.
And that kind of money takes a couple of years to line up the pathway on.
Yes, and I'm sure local politics and other levels of politics will come into play as well, most likely.
Well, let's keep rolling and we can come back to anything about the place or the maps or the photos, but process. I've got 2 slides. One of them is this accounting, which on your screen is a little difficult to read. Maybe your hard copy is easier. It's just sort of the list of all the deliverables. We have 7 tasks and a number of memos. I put a dark check mark next to what we've completed, but a gray check mark next to a number of these memos that we have begun, but have not completed. And so if you're curious about all of those details, they're here, but I find this graphic, I like it a lot better. It's sort of visual and shows the process and the relationships of the 7 tasks. The orange arrow, which says we are here, is identifying where we are in the process right here near the beginning, kicking things off. That person walking was the site visit, which we conducted back in December with the consultant team. But this is the very first advisory committee meeting, and I think Charlie mentioned we've got a total of 5 of those. So we'll be back here multiple times sharing right at the second meeting, a lot more about the existing conditions. So that floodplain question and the realignment will be covered as part of that memo. And we'll have some feedback about existing transportation conditions. And I believe a first look at some of the market forces in the area that our Eco Northwest will be helping us with. And then you can see coming up in February, those first drafts of those memos, but the folks sitting at the table are the interviews. So we want to start identifying who to talk to and working with our engagement folks to make some targeted outreach. And we'll need to work with Charlie and you. Perhaps we bring you into the questions we ask at those interviews so that when we come back to you in March for that second advisory committee meeting, we'll have a bit more of that feedback as well as some of that technical underlying analysis, sort of site analysis to share. So beyond that, there's a community meeting. There's a few of those. There's 3. You can see 1, 2, and 3 further out, March, May, August, generally speaking. Or wait a second, now I'm looking at the wrong symbol. There's 2. One to kind of conclude the existing conditions, and then a second community meeting where we are looking into our alternatives. So that by the time we get down later in July, we're hopefully have a preferred alternative starting to come together because we've gotten feedback from you and others on that. And hopefully looking out towards late summer, early fall for a draft of the plan and hopefully adoption in October. So there's quite a bit to do this year, and you can see every month matters. So it's a somewhat aggressive schedule. But I think this organization makes a lot of sense about how kind of the rhythm of when the memos will be developed, when the meetings will be held, when the community can engage, and when we'll be bringing it forward for adoption. So that's a lot of content, and it's sort of leading us to our next steps are those interviews. We have a draft of the website for the project at this address, which hasn't been posted to the city website yet. But Charlie, I don't know if you've had a chance yet. We've just kind of put it up for ourselves. Anyone here could access it, but it's not, like I said, on the city's website. So it's not generally available to the public yet. And it just kind of announces that we're doing this study and some of the same content you're seeing tonight.
Yeah, we'll be working on getting that live.
Okay. And then the stakeholder interviews, and then these analysis memos around transportation and existing conditions. And part of the work is also being clear about how the project is integrating and equity into it. So that's the slideshow. And as I mentioned, happy to go back and review any of the content, but we really want to hear from all of you.
And I know Rita's got to leave like right now. So if you had any closing thoughts you wanted to add, that might be a good time.
No, I think the discussion and contributions to the purpose is outstanding, you know. I want to clarify that the dotted blue line and everything is where it is going to go. Okay. And then from that point up the hill, it starts going up.
Yeah.
It costs a lot of money to build houses on the hillside, that stuff, you know. Also wanted to mention that there might be some funding possibilities through legislative action, like I'm talking about federal money, especially if we're talking about flooding. Senators and representatives they all are given so much money that they can send out their hand off their favorite projects, you know. So you want to get on the good side of somebody. to say, hey, we've got something really important here for our community. So we're doing that with affordable housing right now, and I'll show you how successful we are. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Rita.
Thanks, Rita.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ask my question again. We're at the discussion portion of the agenda, and it's really open to any and all questions from you, the committee members, just to, if there's anything we need to clarify or that you want to go back and look at any slides. And it's your time that's available to keep talking.
Are there any key or common comments or feedback we've heard from people that have taken a look at the site for potential redevelopment? I mean, there's a sign out there that says it's for sale. It's obviously been available for sale for some time. So what do we hear from potential developers when they come and take a look at it?
And Peter's probably in the best position to respond to that. Maybe Alex, if you have anything.
Yeah, we show the property quite a bit, actually. I think most of the folks that look at it have either been just speculating, lowballing, just sit on the property, cut the trees on the hillside, fill the lot with used cars, and kind of do nothing with it, basically. Should be a shame. We go down the path of talking with the different industrial concerns or commercial concerns. And they want to subdivide the property most likely, or they only want 10 acres, or they only want 20 acres, or half the lot, or something of that sort. And typically, you know, they may want to stay away from the creek, or, you know, take the prime triangle, like right at the corner of Monmouth Cutoff, which basically renders the rest of the lot completely worthless and doesn't get the full potential for the community, the city, etc. And a lot of those just fall through as they just start to look at what does it take to subdivide, where are we going to subdivide, etc. A major concern has been the floodplain, because you cannot, if you use private funds, you can get private funding for anything. But as soon as you look at commercial funds and they pull up the floodplain map, poof. Exactly. So thus our work on trying to at least have a plan in place for the creek. And if a road does go through, my bias is to create as large of subdivided chunks of land as possible. You know, 10 and 20 acre chunks of land that could be used for either commercial purposes or definitely industrial purposes. So that's been it. The recent slowdown has just kind of been expected with interest rate fluctuation and just what's going on, et cetera. But I have a feeling in speaking with the brokers, we'll start to see a lot more visits and potential again. But this project and the Ash Creek project in the state, just the topography are key to seeing the full potential of this incredible piece of property.
So the realignment and the floodplain issue, even though it's a separate project, it seems to me like it's almost like a key third component of what we're talking about here: transportation, economic development, and then addressing this major obstacle to both of those things. And I don't know if the scope of our work covers that. There's obviously crossover, but I want to, you know, what I'm seeing now is we've got two listed in our purpose statement, but the flood and creek realignment issue is not. So just want to make sure that we're paying attention to all of that, because we can plan to move the creek, but if we don't get around to it, or there's not the funding, or it takes a little longer than we thought, you know, cart horse.
Yeah.
Type thing, so.
Here, I agree on that.
I was gonna say, to answer your earlier question about what developer or, what buyers are looking for, greenfield sites on the I-5 corridor, that's.
Of course,
Yeah. But I think actually to that point, it's hard, we don't have any really 50 acre chunks in the I-5 corridor anymore that are like easy sites, as you know, and so, and I think honestly, just even having the transportation, choke point of Salem makes a big site with like heavy truck traffic or something like that really it's not a great fit for a lot of places or for a lot of folks out here. So the 10 and 20 acre parcel seems much more in line with what people like, what I think what we're seeing too from Suncor perspective. So
Are folks still interested in the rail component, or is that sort of going by the wayside as more and more time goes on?
I'll let Charlie maybe.
I was gonna let somebody else respond to that one.
Well, it is complicated.
Yeah.
I don't want to say, I don't say.
We've had some people that have no interest in it. They can't support the traffic. We've had a couple of buyers who want to reinvigorate it. They know how to reinvigorate it, and they would utilize the rail space between this property and the large, tall, the silver.
The seed warehouse.
Thank you. As a switching yard, and then develop a spur onto the property. But you would need to have a lot of rail traffic, 10 cars a day or some crazy amount to justify turning that rail line back on. That said, I'd like to add one little point is the site currently, if you look at a site map, it's bisected by some vestige of rail that is still owned by the railroad and not released by the railroad. And it is a strip of land right by those trees, right there, there's the rail. There it is, right there. That is owned by the railroad. This spur right here is owned by the railroad. And I think to make this site really usable, those would need to be also released somehow or purchased or something, because how do you put a road in when and then the rail spur crosses this road, and there's a railroad crossing there, which if the rail's not needed, you wouldn't have to spend a couple $1 million for a railroad crossing, et cetera. And that's been, we have tried to engage those folks, and we don't seem to be, I don't know, on the right planet, or I don't know.
Well, and then it's UP that owns those parts, right? I think so.
I think so.
Yes, the Portland Western has been actually very relatively responsive for the rest of it that runs through, like that crosses Gotsey and everywhere down there. But yeah, it's different. UP's different. Harder to play with.
Yeah, we even submitted a application to have the rail crossing abandoned, the one that's down south of the creek, that really goes 2 feet past the fog line, and then there's no more rail. And I don't even know if it's connected on the other side, and they won't relinquish that crossing.
The one across Main Street?
Yeah, the one across Main, the south one though.
Yeah.
The other one, we had to get a permit to work around. And then that one they won't relinquish. So they really do want to keep it, even though it's not really connected to anything.
Okay.
Just the extra little fun layer.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's
enough.
That's why I asked. So the potential for rail is still there, but it's probably not going to be a component of future development.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of leads indicate that they'd be happy to have a spur, but it's not a requirement, and also everybody understands, I think, that the number of cars that you have to move, it makes it.
And it's the end of the line. It doesn't go through to anywhere else.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So I want to,
Even if-
go
even
ahead.
if the railroad doesn't, relinquish the main rail line that rolls through and runs this spur here. It would behoove us in the city to have them relinquish these empty lines that aren't even have all the tracks on it, so to speak. And those become an issue with a lot of these folks saying, I want this 20-acre plot right here, and then there, yeah. Can you put a building there?
I wanted to go back and respond again to John's initial question about the creek issue. And I wholeheartedly agree. We can't have a meaningful conversation about redeveloping the site without talking about the creek. And obviously it's a critical component. That being said, the scope of this project is a TGM project, Transportation Growth Management, between ODOT and DLCD. So it's transportation and it's land use. Doesn't necessarily get us very far down the path to talk about realigning waterways. There's a separate, project that we're looking at with that. So it's all together in the sense, but we can't get too far along with that part of the discussion in this context because of the source of the money and the players that are involved in funding it, and the objectives are really tied to transportation and land use.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, it's perfect.
But that doesn't mean we should forget about it, because we can't. It's an integral part.
They need to be operating and advancing concurrently. Yeah. And paying attention to each other.
Yes. That's why Tom's here.
But I will say,
Either
the
link.
other part about the floodplain is, I think if you look at the map that's up right now, you actually see that there is a gap in the floodplain, but that gap really isn't there. When you look at the flood map, that area is actually identified. The whole mill site is basically a blob that says this is a floodplain, but we didn't map it. So they didn't actually define a good channel. And that's what makes it really hard to do anything there, because they just say, that's all floodplain. And they just, it's unmapped because it went underground. So they didn't analyze, they stopped where the channel stopped, and everything underground, they just went arc like that and say, this is floodplain.
And this map does actually show where the current channel is, as best as it's defined. So if you compare this map to the other one, you can kind of see the difference of the realignment.
When it starts backwater flooding like that, or when it starts backing up like that, and then over top of the road and stuff, is that getting held up by the bridge, or is that getting held up by the pipe diameter?
By the bridge, the pipe diameter. When the bridge is completely full, the pipe diameter still has 40% capacity left, at least at the inlet. That's not to say who knows what's going on underground.
I mean, yeah, if we're lucky, some of the water will go over Main Street and get back into the channel before it goes to the pipe, but a lot of it does skip over and just start going across the site.
Gotcha.
And then there's other spots along the way where it does daylight, like right in the middle. It goes from 2 pipes to 1 pipe, and there's a big opening, and that'll fill up as well. So,
But it's come out over you before too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've walked across the site when there's that much water across the entire mill site. So
And Jeff, what impacts have you guys seen on your side with flooding?
I've won the boat races every year with the little race we have. It's so good race. Now, we do have to prepare. We have the annex building, and we have to sandbag that. We have to make sure that our product's up off the ground. It's gotten really high, so we watch it all the time. So every year it's been close, yeah.
Thankfully, you watch
Yeah.
it.
But I've got employees there that have been there since 1985, and they've seen it all. So
So, so I see a road alignment. Are we anticipating that road alignment is gonna be there, or
Just a suggestion.
Just a suggestion.
Yeah, the
Start
alignment that you
conversation.
see there is just a suggestion. There's certainly other alignments for streets that could occur. But to the extent that this was an idea to connect Monmouth Cutoff more directly to the Main Street couplet, that was sketched in. There's also been discussion of a potential extension of like a southwest bypass down the log decks towards Bridlewood, relieving some of that traffic on Fairview. So you can see that from the sketch as well. But again, these are all conceptual. We are getting ready to kick off the transportation system plan update for the city. Some of you might also be on the advisory committee for that. So to the extent that these projects will kind of all feed into one another, we'll see how this shakes out, but it's there to start the discussion.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know, cause I look at that and I think that's a one-way couplet that you're extending them through a neighborhood like that. I do think that there would be some concerns associated with that. Like, when I look at it, I think just make the grid more robust through there. Making some of those street connections down to that new road, if that new road were to go in. And I would, I know I might be thrown out of the room here, but I am a Dallas resident. I'll just throw out the idea of potentially breaking the one-way couplet. Just as something that might be a interesting idea. I know why the couplet is put in, but I also think that a whole bunch of folks don't get to see the best part of Dallas when they're driving through this road back here. You know, I know the old mayor calls this what, the coal chute or whatever, across the road. And if you put all the most through traffic and then allowed local traffic on a well-defined street grid, then visitors could see this part of Dallas in a much clearer way. So that's just one thing when I think about
I love your bold statement to do away with the couplet. Fred, I want you to lead that for us, okay? And we do have ODOT joining us. You know, Michael's up there in the clouds. So.
You heard that right, Michael?
I wouldn't have expected anything less, Fred. I appreciate it. And maybe that's a theme we can carry through this project. And is, you know, think big. I mean, there's some big constraints, I think, identified even at this kickoff meeting, and certainly we'll lend some clarity to it when we get into the existing conditions. And the consultant team has been able to integrate, you know, some of the work that's already been done around floodplain and other aspects, and then the transportation component too will be a big part of that. But you know, the constraints will be there. You know, the consultant team knows the you know, elephant in the room, you know, land use, creek, transportation. But think big, and we can always pull it back in. But just maybe a little inspirational comment there.
Thanks, Michael. I will just say that I am personally very conflicted about this layout. On the one hand, I love the idea of extending the couplet, whether it functions as a couplet or not, basically tying downtown into this connection back to 99 and just alleviating the current wonky sort of left turns we have going to connect through downtown. But I'm very sensitive, especially to Jefferson Street on the south end, because not as much with Main, because Main is wider and it has already some transitional uses there. But Jefferson it's an old residential neighborhood. And if we were to extend, you know, primary traffic through that area, that would dramatically impact the character of that neighborhood. I'm very sensitive to that. And so I don't have a solution of how we get both of those things. Well, that's kind of what we're all here to figure out is in part. But I'm at least very aware of that. If we did it just like this, it would really impact that neighborhood.
If I may, the site south of the creek where the flatlands are, basically the prime industrial area, is the majority of the plot. There's only about 17 plus acres on the hillside. And so if you take those 45-ish acres, you end up with, two 20-acre parcels or 4 10-acre parcels. And that's a lot of what, at least I've been hearing, people are stepping into the fold and have been interested in. And I want to, at least my personal opinion, is to try and maximize the plot and buildable areas and not create little sliver lots or less desirable areas that have less economic benefit or appeal for industry or commercial purposes.
And that would align with the city policy on our industrial land. This is one of the largest one parcel sites in the entire state.
Yeah.
And right in our development, our comprehensive plan, it states that we need to protect the industrial area. And especially when you have transportation, yes, it has rail, but it's also direct routes over to 99. It has the utilities there already. We have a lot of communications in already. There's a lot of power here already. So those are things that we do have to preserve according to our comprehensive plan. But the realignment that you guys were talking about with the couplet is the chance of commercial area coming down a little bit further. Residential to the south on the hillside, as you heard Rita, that's not great land for building, but with vision, it could be really unique land. In fact, it's one of the best views that the city has to offer if you build high enough. And so you could see condominiums going up the hillside, overlooking depending on how you develop it and you get the creek realignment, there's potential there. But it's extremely expensive land to develop for residential area. But I don't think that's what you're just happy to get. In development, it's nice to get rid of that area.
Maximize the industrial area, don't create little unsaleable or we wouldn't maximize the potential revenue stream for the city going forward from those plots. The hillside, and I'm happy to take anybody who wishes to do a walk around the site, go up on the hillside. Tom and I have been up there. There are some kind of flat-ish
Yeah,
areas.
it's pretty benched. Yeah.
Somebody would have to look at the soil. The views are incredible.
Yep.
Coast Range all the way to McMinnville, Salem, just a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, and this is only halfway.
Well, that's only part of
This
the
is
way
the
up, too.
lower, yeah. The
You have
lower
an
step, if
unobstructed
you
view
will.
of the coast, the Cascade Range.
I mean, the
Then
other
even
thing
to
I
the
look
coast
at
range.
with that creek realignment is if you push it against that toe of the slope and then try to maintain a southern buffer to shade it and protect the stream, you can do that with that steepest part of the slope. So you're not necessarily building on the steepest part, and it does bench out and it goes quite a ways back there on this property where it's relatively
Less
steep.
than Lake Oswego in most places.
Yeah, the reality of it is it's not conducive for industrial or commercial development. And so it either develops as residential or it doesn't develop at
The
all.
mill never used it.
Right,
I mean, that's-
exactly.
I mean, yeah.
It either becomes a park or it becomes some kind of residential development, or it just becomes nothing.
Isn't the park up further to the left?
Well, to the extent that as you're driving down Main Street, what you see is the green hillside. Reserving that might be something of value to the community. I think there could be some community pushback if that were to be deforested and turned into a bunch of houses, losing that view as you're driving down Main Street. It's a very prominent thing as you're looking that direction. So
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I would hope that, there could be a plan to retain as much of that vegetation and that view shed as possible and still achieve the goal of some limited development in that area. I think it's possible.
One last comment. Speaking from a city councilor standpoint, we're excited about this project. We're excited to come alongside and the resources that having the municipality involved with the private industry lends us to be able to grasp some of those monies that aren't available to you as far as working and making our city a beautiful town.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, Michael. And you know, and again, as we talk about sort of the downstream funding for some of these improvements, you know, having a plan like this actually in place and adopted will immensely help us secure that, and having the public engagement involved with this process will go a long ways to demonstrating that we're not just dreaming up something that has no feasibility. We've spent resources, we've spent time, we've had the public engagement, you know, we have a plan. And that means a lot to potential funders, that you actually have put some thought into what you really want.
It was mentioned about a park, and I'm just curious with the creek realignment, is the idea to add some sort of pedestrian path or other type of path to access that or make it some sort of green space?
I mean, it's not currently in our parks master plan. I'll just say that, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't be, I guess.
Right, the master plans that we do have, where it references a potential future North Fork Ash Creek trail, that references more to the west of Main Street. But certainly those master plans could be amended as this project moves forward. There's also, you know, dedicated funding sources out there, grant funding for things like bicycle pedestrian trails. So to the extent that we're looking to leverage as many outside resources as we can, while making for a more livable community for us all. I certainly would be in favor of that, but again, that's something to be kind of worked out as we go through the
Yeah,
details.
and that could be, you know, one of the outcomes of this whole process is that recommendation.
As we daylight the creek, it would make sense to at least look at it. I mean, the creek along the Rick Real Creek, it's a good path, and maybe some sort of connection in the future to the two or something like that.
You're speaking Chase's language here.
I'll say that, I mean, the rail line doesn't run all the way through, but thinking about bikes, pedestrian, I don't know how much money, but rails to trail, if that's not really an important thing for the site, that connecting to the 99B5, that whole going out would be a tremendous,
Oh yeah, I have so many conceptual maps just floating in my desk that have gone nowhere.
About every other week or so, somebody talks about that concept, I think. And so I think it's wonderful. The challenge, as I see, is we're a bit of the tail wagging the dog, because most of the length of that concept is way outside city purview. It's in the county. So, you know, I think the way I look at it is we'll play when we get everybody else playing. And right now nobody's playing with that. And so I love the concept, but I think it'd be challenging for the city of Dallas to lead it because we're such a small part of it.
But we can dream big.
Yeah, I mean, I love it.
I would agree with that, but I would also say that you guys have far more population than anyone else along the trail.
True.
Like, I mean, you have, I mean, you would be the primary user of the trail. There's no other really houses between here and 99 feet.
Right. It's just like, I mean, and you might be right, Fred. I mean, this is out of my wheelhouse, really. I just know that, you know, we represent maybe 5% of the length of it, if that. And so we're way outside of our jurisdiction to actually get that project going.
and that's way outside of this actual area that it's built in. Well, if we could just get the little piece coming out of it, or if you could tie any piece of it into there and start that trail, and you know, if you have that first piece.
The Ash Creek North Fork, as it proceeds further to the east, it does come almost right up to the railroad track in the vicinity of the high school. So making the connection in that area would make a lot of sense. The railroad, it ends up in the middle of Birch Street, which is not the greatest place to try and put a bike trail, but diverting then down south along the creek would be a logical connection. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
Like I said, I have all sorts of conceptual maps on my desk that I've never gone anywhere.
I'm just gonna throw out the idea, and I mean, I know that we've talked a little bit about commercial, but I do think commercial on the site, at least to some degree. And I think strategically placing the commercial specifically along Main Street, so it's sort of like an amenity for the residences. Because I mean, I can just imagine creating a high value, high density residential area overlooking just industrial is probably not the most ideal thing. So giving folks a place to like linger associated with that, that would be great. And I think also potentially it would help extend downtown down the street, which would be ideal.
And with the prime industrial sites in the eastern half, I think what you just articulated would sort of evolve anyway. You'd get your commercial residential on Main Street as an extension of the downtown. And the prime industry would be it further to the east. So I think we got a good start here. I'm impressed. I like the idea of building of developing a plan for a transportation corridor through there. I think that's a key thing. You talk about where the creek, oh, it's underground in some spots, and then people don't know that, is unless you've got permission to go in there on a site visit, people wouldn't even see that. They don't know the creek is there.
Right.
A lot of people don't. So
there's something else just to consider is that, this site is really, especially if you do the road realignment in some fashion as it's crafted right now, this is the entryway into the community if you're coming from 99. And so you just think about that context as well as you're thinking about envisioning the site is whatever is placed at, on the eastern edge. I mean, that's what people are going to see as they come into the community.
Yeah, so with this particular street plan, as shown here, you've got kind of two main visual focal points where you could do a development that has some kind of iconic appearance to it. Where Monmouth Cutoff crosses Euglo, you've got that view, and then the road turns, so you could put some kind of building there at Euglo. But then again, where the road would curve at Jefferson, you could have some kind of building there right in the sight line, some kind of iconic structure. So you've got a couple of different view sheds there that would lend themselves to some nice development opportunities.
Jim, can you go back to that mission statement, the longer one? Again, earlier I called out the last statement there, and so I just want to just bring some attention to the language of the historical context, and just mention that there's the one building, and again, you can maybe forward now, Jim, to those photos. There's a couple different photos where we're actually inside the old planing mill building. The dimensions of that, Peter, are like 300 by 50 or something like that, or
Yeah, it's approximately 300 feet.
yeah. It's really cool. And Peter's, I think, always been enamored with it. I've become more enamored with it after we were out there at our site visit in December. But it's something, as we talk about the historical context of the site, figuring out how we can maybe somehow preserve some or all of that structure might be something worth considering. Also, just immediately adjacent to the site, and you'll see it, and you saw it in the photos, is the seed warehouse, which is not part of the mill site, but it's arguably the tallest structure in Dallas. I think it's even taller than the courthouse. So it's a very iconic structure that sort of, again, harkens back to the history of the industrial area. And preserving that long term, maybe another initiative that isn't a part of this project per se, but becomes part of that overall preserving the historical and honoring the historical context of the area. So it's just something to think about.
I look at that building, that picture, and I see basketball hoops in there.
I was thinking go-kart. I was thinking go-kart racing, right?
a big park with a roof on it.
That would be awesome.
Or actually more of like a Pike Place market is, more of, I think, would be kind of cool. And I think Peter's got the brew pub and the bocce court. Yeah.
Bunch of
Well, we'll pull Oktoberfest away from, what is it?
Yeah, but just let your imagination wander a bit and just imagine what you could potentially do with and again, we're right in the middle of it. There's a whole another half of it behind us in this particular shot.
It's pretty expansive.
Back to the purpose statement, are we altering the purpose statement to include economic development that we spoke of? And I think somebody also added, I think you may have added something else to the purpose statement. Are we actually gonna alter it, or is that something that will happen naturally in the process?
That's a great question. At this point in the process, I think we want to hear from you and all your ideas. And I think if altering makes sense, then I believe there's that kind of flexibility to make sure, if economic development, that statement, you feel needs emphasis as part of this plan that we, deliver at the end, then absolutely we should include it. So I think if we want to tinker with the words, yes, please. And I would invite you, to suggest if you come up with the.
I'm an advocate for it. I think it goes to that chicken and egg argument, like putting the road in the appropriate place. It addresses all the things in this purpose statement, but we also need to address, I'm an advocate of addressing the economic benefits for the city as well. And that we can make a beautiful road that rolls through there, and we kind of don't address the needs of developers for economic development.
I think employment needs, if you do a careful reading, employment needs probably encompasses that, to be honest.
There you go.
And so I think, it's more subtle and less on the nose than probably what you're talking about.
I think one of the challenges is that economic development could take many different forms. The employment needs of the city, that may be different than the need for the city for tax revenue from commercial land, which may be different than the need for property owners to maximize the value of their land, which may be different than the needs of developers looking for employment sites. So I don't know how you square that peg, but.
Well, I think I'm the one that muddied the waters between land use and economic development, because when I think in my mind about making changes or adjusting land use in that area, it automatically leads to economic development. It's going to be commercial, it's going to be industrial, it's going to be employment generating property. So I think we're all talking about the same things, just using different terms.
Yeah.
So that any land use that we're doing down there is going to be geared towards economic development. And even a portion of it is medium or high density residential. Again, that addresses the needs of employers, because you build a plant here of some kind, people got to have places to live. So I was just wondering if we wanted to, if it was necessary to add the creek realignment component into it. And I think we determined that that's a separate project. So I see land use and economic development as being interchangeable for our purposes here.
I agree.
I would just encourage us then, I know it's more work with the consultant team, but I would like to see two sets of alternatives then, one with the creek in the current place and one with the creek does that make sense?
We are tasked to create alternatives. So that could be part of the underlying kind of framework of each is, kind of enhance or keep in place, but the city I know has been studying moving it. So I don't want to, if they say, oh no, we're moving it, then I think we might have to say, all alternatives show it down here.
It doesn't make much sense to me to do a plan without a creek realignment, because everything seems contingent. Like if you didn't do a creek realignment, it's not here. I don't think you would do anything else, to be honest. Like the property is still kind of locked up.
Yep.
Well,
yeah, not only does it get locked up, but you haven't addressed the flooding issues either.
That's what. It's still the flooding issue is kind of the piece that really needs to get solved before you can do any of the development.
I mean, I think, Fred, if we were going to do alternatives, we should do alternatives around how it connects with the couplet. If there's looking at viable alternatives, I think that'd be something to consider, perhaps.
Okay, I mean, that. I used to be a planner for a community that had a whole bunch of big ideas and they never got the big ideas done because they never got the big ideas done. They never did anything. And
I
so
see what you're saying.
It does appear though, that through the analysis that's been done so far, that it would actually be cheaper to realign the creek than it would be to
Daylight it in place.
daylight it in place. Because you'd have to keep the creek running while you're daylighting it.
Yeah.
You'd have to run an even wider channel for the flooding. Moving it makes the creek longer, helps address the flooding.
Shapes it.
And so they kind of go hand in hand. And that was why it seemed to do multiple things, be better environmentally, be better from a stormwater perspective, be better economically, and etc.
Yeah, if we have to build new bridges at Main Street and Euclid, which we do, they're undersized. It's a lot faster and cheaper to build that over dry land and then put the water underneath than it is to tear out the existing bridge and build it over running water.
Plus just digging the entire channel. I mean, right now you could dig the entire length of that channel except the two ends and you're not in water.
Right,
You know, you
okay.
can dig the entire thing out on dry land, then you just connect the two ends. That's all you need the permit for. You know, whereas right now, if you were to do it in place, you'd have to get a permit for the entire reach. And, you know, like Peter said, it's wider. The study showed that it'd have to be almost 100-foot wide swath by the time you started down, across and up. Whereas if you move it, I think it was 60 or 70.
Yeah, it was on the order of half as wide.
Yeah, that's like 60.
Okay.
And you had the shading, including the trees there, you know, it just, everything just kind of fit together, so.
And it keeps your industrial land locked together.
Yeah.
Right, you don't have somebody like currently, well, how do I build if they're gonna be, you know, how do I build on top of a creek where
Carefully.
all of a sudden, yeah, I mean, you end up with these funny, weird parcels.
That nice.
The one thing that I do see is the city has changed a lot since our housing needs analysis was done and our commercial needs analysis. Aren't we about to do another one?
No,
On
so
commercial?
the EOA was just done in 21.
And
Economic
since,
opportunity.
and since
HNA
then,
was
what,
2018.
and since then, what is almost completed? We've almost completed the Lockrell node rezoning, which takes care of the majority of our needs analysis in every one of those studies. So we don't know what we need by those two studies. So, and it's pretty, when's that going to take place? Later this year, right?
We don't have a plan to redo.
The Lockrell node.
Yeah,
We're
Lockrell
talking
node.
about, what are you talking about?
The Lockrell node,
Yes, we're doing that this year, yes.
it'll be
I thought you were talking about
completed.
when we're gonna update the EOA
Which-
and the HNA.
If everybody's not familiar with the Lockrell node, it used to be like the Barbary node, have low density, medium density, high density neighborhood commercial. It's now strongly high density commercial and a little bit of medium density. mainly.
Brand new mixed use.
And brand new mixed use, which we don't even have in the development code.
I'm excited about that. That'll be fun.
Yes, we are. So
There
it's
is
exciting.
a current market conditions, part of the existing conditions
Right.
task, so, yeah.
And I saw your consultants on there. I was very excited about it. Telling us what's needed.
All right, well, we're coming up on time. Unless anybody has last comments or questions. Anybody online have any final comments? That sounded like a.
No, that was me.
I'll make one last comment. I thank each and every one of you. The city is very excited about this project. I'm personally very excited about this project. It's been a dream to see this site redeveloped and to develop it with transportation and all these needs that are listed in this purpose statement. it could be a huge asset for not just Dallas, but the entire Polk County area.
Right. Thanks. That sounds like a great closing.
All right, thanks, everybody. We'll be in touch. We'll have another meeting in a couple months.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
John, how are you doing now?
What's that?
What are you doing?
Right now, I'm working on my job. Right now.